I really enjoy having a garden, but I also enjoy having a bonfire every now and again. So this happened. In the middle of the greenery is this lovely scar, which is just a patch of bare earth and ash. So I designed this hexagonal fire pit which I can weld up from sheet material. So I bought myself some 3mm stainless steel and started marking it all up. At every stage I checked the angles against my calculations just to make sure that it was all going to fit together perfectly. I tried clamping a couple of pieces together and cutting them at the bandsaw, but it was stupidly slow. So I reverted to a steel edge guide and an abrasive disc in the angle grinder. These cuts are always sharp, so they have to be filed afterwards. So I've just finished making panel number 1, and I'm going to use this now as a template to make the other 5. So I'm going to make 2 that are exactly the same as this, and then 3 that are a complete mirror image of it. So hopefully that'll mean that any discrepancies even out, and it'll be okay. But I'm angle grinding all of this, so there's always going to be a bit of difference, but hopefully they'll be good enough. So let's go make another 5. Next, I whipped up a set of plywood jigs to help me with positioning. The panels sit in a groove and lean up against some supports to hold them in shape whilst I weld. Once they were made, I was ready to weld up all the panels at once. I started by putting a few tack welds on each joint. And then once I was happy with the shape, I laid a bead along the length of each seam. Once I had the majority done, I removed the jigs and propped up the edges to get into the corners. So now we've got to check whether this has worked or not. So if I did things right, and the floor is flat, and the jigs did their job, then these top edges are all going to be on a flat plane. So here's the material we're going to use for the bottom, and if this goes on and doesn't rock, that's going to be it working. Tiny bit there, but that feels really good to me. That's gone really well. I'm actually really surprised how well that's gone. So the next step is to mark out this bottom, cut it out and weld that on. But first I wanted to weld up all of the inner seams too. With that done, I traced around the shape and cut it out at the angle grinder. Perfect fit. Then I welded up both sides of the seam just like the other edges. After that, I spent ages grinding the outside weld smooth. I tried grinding the inner weld, but gave up as it just took way too long. Up to now, I've been relying on calculations, but at this stage I can't be certain that I'd actually made it accurately. So I was using the piece itself to get my angles. I used that angle to mark up some legs to hold the main body off the ground, and again cut them with the angle grinder. I aligned them by laying a length of angle iron across the base and clamping the legs to that. These only needed a couple of stitch welds to secure them. At this point I've got a perfectly functional fire pit. But there's a few more things that I want to do just to make it that little bit better. The first thing is to drill a few holes in the centre to hopefully give a bit more airflow into the fuel. And the second thing is to make a small shelf that covers the bottom, the purpose of which is both to catch any of the ash that falls down in through those air holes, but also to act as a bit of a radiation barrier. Because this kind of fire pit has a nasty habit of scorching the ground underneath it, I'm hoping that having an extra layer with a bit of air in between them should help diffuse the heat and hopefully not scorch the ground. But I'm kind of making this up, so we'll see. I used all the scraps from the rest of the panels to make the shelf, and I'm not worried about what it looks like, as no one's ever going to see it. I only gave it a few small stitch welds, as it has no strength requirements. Then I cut it to match the hexagonal shape, and cut a couple of brackets to hang it on the bottom. Then I could drill out those air holes in the bottom of the pit, and deburr them on the other side. Then it was done! And this thing is flippin' awkward to move around. The only thing left to do is get a fire going in it. I'm really pleased with the end product, and these two seem to be enjoying it as well.